What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Wandering Sword, courtesy of a demo that is actually up on Steam right now, and this is a game that I highlighted during the Steam Next Fest at the beginning of February. However, the demo for this title is available through the end of the month, so if you want to check out anything I show off in this video for yourself, at least through February, it is available on Steam. But while I did talk about this a little bit during that highlight video, I wanted to go a little more in depth and talk about it on its own, so here we are. Now, to kick this off, as I'm sure you've seen in the gameplay up to this point, Wandering Sword is a turn-based RPG utilizing pixel art, and it's definitely in that sort of JRPG genre. However, it's got a few unique things going for it that I thought were really interesting. Now, story-wise, the reigning dynasty has fallen, and in its place, a ton of gangs have sprung up and are all vying for power. We play a young man whose friends got caught up in a battle between these gangs and were ultimately killed, ourselves almost being killed as well. A powerful swordsman that we were traveling alongside saves us, but just barely. One of the gangs hits us with a poison that almost kills us outright, but after being nursed back to health, we take it upon ourselves to exact revenge on the people who did this to us and our friends, which begins our RPG journey. And while it's not in the demo, the marketing for the game tells us that there are going to be multiple endings and a lot of choice and consequence that actually impacts the story. Now, what is in the demo is a handful of quests that can be resolved a few different ways. Nothing crazy as far as effects there, but we can already see a little bit of that choice and consequence in the side quests. And given what we know of the plot, if I was a betting man, I would say more than likely the choices involving the main story will revolve around which one of these gangs we wind up helping, as they're all, again, vying for control of the land. And much of the demo revolves around the internal conflicts between all of these gangs as you finally start to learn to fend for yourself in a world that is rather unforgiving. So again, if I had to guess, I imagine we're forced to pick sides, and that leads to the multiple endings. But we wouldn't be able to get to the ending if we didn't first talk about some of the systems surrounding our own character progression, and that's where I think the game gets pretty interesting. With the main things I want to talk about being your martial art abilities as well as your meridian points. There's also more basic stuff like equipment, that kind of thing, but those are pretty much par for the course for an RPG. Now, one of the first abilities you're taught is a cultivation technique, which is sort of a recovery ability that you can use in combat. But as you participate in combat, you'll earn martial points. You can spend martial points to upgrade both your martial abilities as well as your cultivation abilities. Upgrading your cultivation abilities provides you meridian points. Meridian points get to be spent on essentially a talent point system that sees you directing your chi into one form or another, thus giving your base stat increases and kind of defining what that character is good at. And there's quite a few of these, so I imagine there will be a decent amount of customization per character here, and that's before we even start talking about the martial art abilities. All in all, there's about 5 different types of martial arts for you to partake in, some of which are just weapons, but we have our regular old fist weapons, we have pole arms, swords, and sabers. Each one of them is good at a different thing. Fist weapons being the best single target, swords are able to attack enemies in a line, sabers are good for attacking in a column, etc. But as you play through the game, you'll be able to learn various abilities for each one of these types. And each martial arts type has a variety of subcategories, which are basically normal attacks, special attacks, mighty attacks, which deal more damage, unique attacks, which are more specific to like the gangs, that kind of thing. And then we can also pick up a lightness ability, which is a movement ability. So utilizing both of those systems, you can create, at least at face value here in the demo, very unique characters, which I think is especially interesting given how the game seems to set up your ability to recruit people. Throughout the relatively open world that we're given access to, a variety of characters will be recruitable, and you'll do this by raising their affinity. You can talk to pretty much anybody in game and hit the observe button, and you'll be able to give them gifts and raise their affinity with you. If it gets high enough, you'll be able to recruit that person into your party, at which point you can start leveling them up, customizing their skills, abilities, etc. So one thing I'm curious about is how many companions are actually available in the game, how many of them are directly related to the story as opposed to just being able to find them out and about, because I imagine the answers to those questions will largely influence just how customizable your party composition winds up being, but they've done a lot of interesting stuff here, and for the most part I like how it's implemented. But that brings us to combat itself. So first things to know is that it's primarily, I would say, a turn-based system, but there is a real-time option. In combat, everyone has a sort of meter, and when that meter gets full, it's that character's turn. So a sort of recovery time system. And in turn-based, this is very straightforward. When someone's recovery time is up, it's that person's turn, then the next, and so on and so on. And given all the various abilities you can do that will speed up to make you get more turns more quickly, you can affect that a little bit. However, in real-time mode, you'll basically handle each character when their meter fills up, but all of the enemy characters continue to move and attack. So it's not exactly as in-depth as, say, a CRPG's real-time with pause mode, but it's certainly a faster option for playing through the battles and definitely worth a mention. Beyond that, every character can move and attack. As I mentioned earlier, all the various combat styles will give you more control over the battlefield depending on what weapon you're using, so you'll be able to hit a column or in a line, etc. So positioning is very important. And you can see we have this sort of battle grid to play around with. And I'm curious over the course of the full game, how much of that is going to be a relatively tactical situation, or if it's going to just kind of devolve into who can hit who the hardest, the fastest. But for the most part, it feels good to play, and with the combination of the various systems I've already described, I think it's got the potential to be pretty good. But obviously, we'll have to see what the late game looks like to know for sure. Now, beyond that, just a few random things before we wrap this up and call it a day. After you get done with the sort of introduction to the game, which explains all of these systems to you, you'll get thrown out into the open world where you can travel to the individual actual areas that you can explore. On the world map, however, which is relatively constrained within the demo, you can explore pretty freely. You do not have to chase after the main story objectives, and it seems like they're willing to give you a lot of room to explore here, and this kind of, in my opinion, combined with their referencing multiple endings, etc., has me curious how non-linear the story is, if at all. But either way, it certainly looks like we'll be able to explore, take on all sorts of optional objectives with various side quests, as each individual location has a ton of NPCs you can talk to, interact with, learn from, do side quests. And one of the things you can partake in is every city generally has a blacksmith, and this blacksmith can forge for you, which is crafting. So if you have the crafting schematics, you can give yourself all sorts of equipment by crafting it yourself. In addition to this, fishing is also available. So it looks like they'll have a decent amount of side systems to allow you to interact with the world a little bit, gather materials, and actually craft this stuff. As with the crafting system, I was able to go around picking up ore and flowers and things, and then actually use that to make gear and stuff, which is a pretty cool addition for a game like this. And when combined with all sorts of characters that are named, you can grow an affinity with, and in some cases, potentially even recruit, it certainly seems like they're aiming pretty high with that. I think that's pretty much going to do it for our look at Wandering Sword. Overall, while the jury's definitely still out on it, it is nonetheless showing a lot of promise, and I will likely check it out when it releases in full, which is supposed to be sometime this year. So provided it actually releases, I do plan on reviewing this one, because what I've played of this demo has me curious, which is why I wanted to make this longer video talking about it as well. Overall, I think it's looking pretty good. You can check it out yourself via that demo right now if you like, but by all means, let me know what you think of it so far down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.